live video stream at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Dan and Amy will again continue to keep you updated on the possible terrorist attack in Utrecht, Netherlands, that Mike Scott's been reporting on.
Yeah, a good friend of the show lives in Utrecht, and she said 8 people were on the tram, multiple injuries, 1 dead, and all the schools are on lockdown because the shooter is still at large. So, again, we'll let you know if anything happens when he is caught, because eventually they will catch him.
Or we don't know if it's an individual. It
Right.
could be more than one at this. We don't know. But Mike Scott will keep you updated, as will we. All right. President Trump kept us updated on where he stands with border security on Friday when he offered this message before he signed his first veto.
As president, the protection of the nation is my highest duty. Yesterday, Congress passed a dangerous resolution that, if signed into law, would put countless Americans in danger, very grave danger. The Democrat-sponsored resolution would terminate vital border security operations by revoking the national emergency issued last month. It is definitely a national emergency. Rarely have we had such a national emergency. Therefore, to defend the safety and security of all Americans, I will be signing and issuing a formal veto of this reckless resolution, and that's what it was.
Now, the omega to his alpha, Beto, Robert Francis Frost O'Rourke, he raised $6.1 million first day of fundraising, eclipsing Bernie's haul.
And Kamala. I mean,
by Kamala by a wide margin.
Yeah, but $6.1 million, that's pretty. I mean, so he does have star power. He does feel like the second coming of Obama.
He's a Texas border congressman who wants to tear down the walls that are currently up, much less does he want to build any new ones. So the contrast between what the president is doing on border security and the position that perhaps one of the Democrat socialist frontrunners has taken couldn't be more stark, which sets up for a very interesting primary campaign. And for more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by John York. He's a contributor to National Review, The Federalist, and The Washington Times, and a policy analyst at the Kenneth Simon Center for Principles and Politics at the Heritage Foundation. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan and Amy. Good to be here.
So I know we love to go to the tote board like this is a telethon, but what does that say?
Right.
Beto at $6 million and Bernie at just under $6 million, and then on down the line with Kamala and the rest.
Well, I know small donor donations were fueling Bernie. I'm not sure if that's true with Beto. It's clear enough that there's a lot of energy on their side. And I suspect a lot of that money will be spent on campaign ads. And since Democrats already have a huge advantage in the mainstream media, they'll already have their wind at their sails a little bit coming into 2020, I imagine.
Do you think it came out over the weekend about his writings when he was 15 years old and comments he made about his wife that, he was kind of joking around about that, she raises the kids, I help out when I can.
Yeah.
He apologized for it. Are we going to move on from here? Or are we going to dig up more, like maybe some of his highlights when he was in the Foss punk rock band?
It seems like when it comes to Democrats and scandals, we do move on pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we still have here in Virginia a governor who
That's
was
right.
pretty notably had some issues in his past, and that's not talked about at all. The Democrats, I mean, it's almost doesn't stand to be mentioned anymore. The Democrats have a gigantic advantage in the mainstream media, and even though we have Fox News and shows like yours and outlets like the Washington Times, et cetera, it still does seem that the mainstream media gets to decide what a scandal is and what a scandal is not. And Fox News sort of can't create a scandal that the mainstream media has to cover in the way the mainstream media can create a scandal that Fox News has to cover.
Yeah, it's a really good point amid all of this talk about white supremacy in the wake of the horrific massacre in New Zealand at the 2 mosques last week. No talk about the Virginia Minstrel Party in terms of problems with white supremacist tendencies in this country. It really is interesting that you re-raised that. I guess Ralph North says, I'm not resigning, and say, okay, well, we tried.
And the lieutenant governor's not
Right.
resigning, right? And the
No, I don't think anyone's.
No, nobody-
okay,
I mean,
everyone
I could be
stood
wrong.
firm. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Well,
Yeah.
why would you? Because there's no pressure to, right? Everybody
That's right.
pulls their foot off the pedal, and that usually begins with Republicans and
Yeah.
conservatives.
And if they left, a Republican would take over, correct?
The secession is such that I think three. Don't
Yeah,
maybe
you'd
don't
have-
quote me on that. I think there's the next Republican. You'd have to get rid of three people.
The Attorney General would
be
have to
the-
go too. Yeah.
That's right, the Attorney General, all the way down to the Attorney General. And I don't think there was really a lot of talk around him resigning at any point. So that would be very unlikely, I think.
Over the weekend, Jeb Bush, you remember him? He used to be the governor of Florida. He sat down with David Axelrod, CNN, and one of the things he said in criticizing Trump is, I mean, he offered some compliments on tax cuts and deregulation, but he said that Trump was sent to drain the swamp, and he thinks the swamp has gotten deeper since Trump has been president. You had a piece at the Heritage Foundation site about the merit protection systems, which is a bit arcane, but
Right.
it speaks to draining the swamp. And so I just wanted to get your assessment of Jeb's assessment of Trump and the swamp.
Draining the swamp, it wasn't exactly clear what that would take or what exactly it would mean when Trump came into office. But I think it's a job that's going to take a little longer than 2 years. I mean, even Jeb, with all of his energy, I don't think could have managed to drain the swamp in 2 years. So, look, we've developed a huge bureaucracy of 2.1 million, and that doesn't count the contractors and the nonprofits that get government grants, et cetera. Dismantling that and sort of creating a government that's more accountable to the people, that's something that's going to be a generation's work. And that Trump has even brought it into the mainstream conversation is a huge accomplishment. So I think the fact we're even talking about the phrase "drain the swamp" and where we are in progress towards that end is chalked up to Trump, and that's great.
Well, but some specifics, other than essentially year one holding the line on regulations at net zero,
Right.
which is a substantial
huge accomplishment.
Right. I mean, that's sort of how low the bar is. But other
Right.
material steps Trump has taken in the right direction.
Well, I think the regulation piece is the biggest piece. He's also outlined a plan through the OMB. They released a plan in the spring that pointed towards examples of agencies that overlapped or duplicated their efforts, and he suggested that Congress should move to kind of close down or consolidate some of these duplicative agencies, of which there's many. There's so many millions of dollars wasted. There's a report that comes out by the government, the GAO, which identifies tens of millions of dollars in just simply bureaucratic, poor structuring that could be reduced without any diminishment of services or to the American people. So the fact that he's identified those, now Congress has to act. It's not, even though Trump is the head of the executive, the executive's architecture is mostly statutory. So major structural changes really have to come from Congress.
Now, the death toll in New Zealand over the weekend rose to 50. There's still 13 in critical
Wow.
condition. And CNN used the tragedy to compare Trump to a white supremacist. Do you think that he did enough to protect his image and what's going on? Or did he do enough to denounce the shooter in New Zealand? What do you make of all this?
That's a big question. I don't suspect there's any amount of denouncement that Trump could engage in that CNN would give him a pat on the back for, right? The goalpost is always moving with Trump in the mainstream media. So of course they're going to point to anything across the globe that happens in New Zealand, in Charlottesville, et cetera, and pin it directly on Trump. And to some extent, if President Trump allows himself to be to be always in response mode, always in crisis response mode. The Democrats have already won, and the Democrats in the mainstream media have won if they are able to distract them in that way. So I think it's good. You make a statement and you move on, and the press will have plenty of critique about, well, maybe it wasn't sufficient, et cetera, but better to not be wholly distracted and let the press guide the White House.
Ocasio-Cortez, sort of talking about where the energy is on the left. It's certainly not just Beto. Interesting Gallup numbers out on Ocasio-Cortez. Maybe some glimmers of hope here. After she won that primary, half of America had no idea who she was. That number's down to about a quarter at this point. But her unfavorabilities have increased substantially since the fall of last year. Gallup polling finds 31% approve or find her, you have a favorable view of her. 41% have an unfavorable view, and she's particularly underwater among men, whites, and adults 55 and older. So maybe a socialism, Ocasio-Cortez, Maduro style, isn't an inevitability.
Well, let's cross our fingers. I mean, the younger generation, Generation Xers, are kind of, I guess we're the older generation of it, but the millennials coming up are sort of, it seems as almost every generation is more socialist than the last, or more leftist, to use a less maybe inciting term. I don't know how this pans out. When you think about it, people have always said people grow more conservative with time. And so each generation, as they get a mortgage, have kids, et cetera, will kind of shift towards the right. I'm not 100% sure that's true. When you think about the World War II generation, did they really ever turn against the New Deal?
Yeah.
Or the Vietnam generation? Did they ever kind of turn away from their sort of new left
Great
1960s
Society
mentality? Yeah. It just seems the next generation is even further to the left. So the older generation seem, by comparison, more conservative. So I'm actually still pretty worried, frankly. I hate to rain on your parade, but I think as these millennials come into the voting age, we're going to shift towards the left, as it seems like we have for a long time.
Well,
unfortunately.
I was hoping that for hope, but that's
yeah.
But
well, maybe I have my fingers crossed. Trust me.
The flip side is AOC is positive fave with women, with non-whites, and with 18 to 34-year-olds. So there you go. To your point. And it's interesting to me, particularly her, because she's such a dingbat. She knows so little, and she's so spectacularly proud of how little she knows. That's notable. It seems to me, though, that this is almost totally a negative partisanship reaction. I have a favorable impression of her because she's attacking somebody I don't like, Trump or Republicans.
Yeah, I think that's right.
He is John York, contributor to National Review, The Federalist, Washington Times, and policy analyst for the Kenneth Simon Center for Principles and Politics at Heritage. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks. And he joined us on our Turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.